Hey guys, welcome back. This is Christina Cremidas, and I say welcome back because most of you probably already know me from my existing video series and podcast series, Real Estate Investing in New York. But I wanted to bring you guys more interesting lifestyle related videos, podcasts, and content in general. I'm obviously more than just a real estate agent. So I wanted to put together a video series and podcast series where we can talk about other interesting things that are related to lifestyle, New York City and not New York City, but really just have a little fun. I would love to cover all different lifestyle-based topics, just everything that we care about, things that will uplift us a bit during these trying times, and different things that we can educate ourselves on, learn together, grow together as a community. This episode, I am so excited to tell you, I have a guest on with me. Her name is Mecca Woods, and Mecca is a professional astrologer. She is so well accomplished. She's professionally trained in astrology. Her work has been featured in some of the biggest media publications, including Bustle, Essence, Girl Boss, Tarot.com, Pop Sugar, BuzzFeed, and Refinery 29. She's also been the host for TLC's Stargazing, and she's the co-host of the astrology podcast Stars on Fire. She's also published 2 books, Astrology for Happiness and Success, as well as the Cosmic Coloring Book. I have all of Mecca's info as well as links to her books in the description for this video or podcast, whichever way you are consuming this content. And in this episode, Mecca and I will be discussing some basics on astrology, how you can use astrology to improve your life, to get to know others better as well as yourself better. And Mecca will also be sharing with us an astrology forecast for 2021. So stay tuned, we're covering everything here. Guys, I am so happy that you are here with me for this new series and for our very first episode. And without further ado, I am going to bring in Mecca. Hi, Mecca.
Hi, Christina. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are so excited to have you and to hear from you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I gave a little bit of background in your intro, but we would love to hear from you what you do and how you found astrology and exactly what you are going to offer us.
Sure. So I've been a professional astrologer for a little bit over a decade now. I never imagined myself being like a professional astrologer. And it wasn't until I had sort of like a quarter life crisis of my own where I felt stuck in work. I felt stuck in love. I knew that I should be doing more, wasn't quite sure what that was. And I ended up getting a couple of readings with an astrologer, and that really just blew me away. You know, like I didn't even know what a birth chart was or any, like I just knew what my sun sign was. I know I was a Sagittarius, but I didn't know that there were so many levels and layers to it. And once I saw that there was so much to astrology and how astrology could be used as a tool for self-development, it just really like unlocked something for me. And I started to study, and it became a hobby at first. And eventually it got to a point where people were like, you should do this, you know? And because I've always had a passion for wanting to help people. And that's usually what I do in my practice. You know, I'm talking to people about their astrology, about their birth chart, what makes them special, what makes them unique, and how they can use the things that they were born with, their inherent gifts, to actually create the kind of life that they want. And so when we talk about astrology, people come to me about, you know, love, career, family, relationships, even sometimes health. And so we sit down and we talk about like how they can use the stars to basically chart their life.
Amazing. It's just such a big concept, but I know that we're going to be able to boil it down so that it's understandable to people who are even very new to astrology during this episode, which I'm so excited for. And you also have a coaching practice of your own, right?
Right. So I fuse astrology and coaching together. And so basically what I'm doing is coaching people through challenging times, or even giving people guidance on how they can overcome a challenge, or even just validating, you know, because sometimes people have these ideas of like, oh, I want to go in this direction, but I'm not sure. Or, oh, I want to do these things or make this change and I'm not quite sure if I'm on the right path. And a lot of times astrology is sort of validating that for them and saying like, no, trust yourself, you're on the right path. And this is how that you can actually take these steps, these tangible steps to manifest the changes that you're trying to make or to get through a difficult time.
I love that so much. And I feel like now, almost more than ever, it's just so important to be in touch with this. And especially too, it's funny, as a real estate agent, I get a lot of messages on Instagram and I get emails from people who reach out to me who express that they're toying with the idea of going into real estate, which is a sales, it is a sales field, and it definitely does take a lot to throw yourself into it. There is no salary. And people really are so nervous. Should I do this? Do I have what it takes? Is this the right decision? Or am I just interested in the idea of being able to make my own schedule? And, I feel like looking to this is a very good way to almost identify within yourself what you might be good at.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we start talking about things like purpose, right? And, what am I here to do? And, as a Sagittarius, like one of my jobs, as many Sagittarians do, we like to answer the big questions, like, why are we here? What are we here to do? What does it all mean? And so through my work, I'm able to look at a person's birth chart, which is basically based on the planetary alignment, based on the day, the time, the year, the location, and the hour that a person was born. So based on that planetary alignment, we can look and see, what this person might be here to do in this lifetime and sort of like what their calling could be. And so what's interesting too about that as well is like, I always encourage people to like, even though they're coming to me for guidance, I always encourage them to also trust themselves as well. So, what I'm offering is a map or a path to where they want to go. But at the end of the day, I also encourage people to like really to follow their truth or to follow their own path. And so with the astrology, I can kind of show them a shortcut in terms of like how they can do that. But ultimately, I really encourage people to really trust themselves, and astrology can show you like how to kind of tap into that inner self.
I love that so much because sometimes people don't like the idea of sitting down for an astrology reading because they relate it to what it might feel like to do a psychic reading, for example.
Right.
And it's not the same. And that's what I love about the astrology and how you talk about you're empowering us to simply use these tools that we can educate ourselves on to make our own decisions and to be our best selves. Versus if you go to a psychic, I've seen situations where people become very dependent on wanting to know the answer. Mm-hmm. This is almost like, here's your toolkit, and now go make the answers that you want.
Right. And I would say that sometimes it happens with astrology too. Like sometimes people get a little dependent on like horoscopes and, like wanting to know like every single step. And I've been finding myself like having that conversation a lot, like especially over this past year, because everything came to like a crashing halt and, everyone had to kind of stop, and so people were like, okay, but what's next? What's next? What's next? And so a lot of conversations that I've been having recently have been kind of centering on, we create the future in the now. So even though there might be things that are coming up that we're looking at, as astrologers, we're constantly kind of, like timekeeping and going back and forth, time traveling, I would say, like kind of, like jumping into the past, looking ahead, like we're kind of like all over the place. And a lot of it has a lot to do with like the cycles, the cycles of time and recognizing that things don't actually operate on a linear path like we like to think. Like everything is very cyclical. And so, with those cycles, like sometimes you have the cycles where everything is up and you're good and everything's going great and you feel happy, and then you have like your downtime where everything is like really difficult and challenging. And so my thing is really kind of helping people to understand sort of like what their cycles are and like how to navigate them. And so, yeah, I get a little bit dismayed when I do see people like trying to like rely too heavily on astrology, or, psychic readings and things like, or tarot readings. I think these things are here to help us and to guide us. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like we still kind of have the final say in terms of like how things go.
Thank you for phrasing that so well. I love that. That was such a really nice explanation.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it's really about how we use the tool, because I always like to give the example of like if someone is looking for love, but if you're at home and, you know, closed off to it and not really like, you know, kind of like putting yourself out there, then it's good chance that that probably like the relationship you're looking for probably won't happen. So a lot of it has to do with like how we respond to the planetary cycles and to the time that we're in as well.
Right. It's such a good point. It's such a good point, and showing us that we are very much empowered and that our decisions do affect what ends up happening.
Absolutely.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics. Your birth chart.
Mm-hmm.
What are the most important things that we should all know about our birth chart?
Sure. So for those who are just kind of getting started, you want to know your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign. Like those are like what I consider to be almost like the holy trinity of a birth chart, because they are really important in terms of like how we express ourselves and, you know, how we approach life and relationships and things of that nature. So your sun sign is important, and that's the one that everyone knows. That's the one that's pretty popular. Like, so when people ask, you know, what's your sign? You know, I'm Sagittarius or I'm a Scorpio, like that's your sun. So your sun is important because it has a lot to do with how you express yourself and your ability to be authentic and comfortable in your skin. You know, it has a lot to do with how you shine your light into the world, and for the things that make you unique and special. It has a lot to do with your confidence and your creativity and your energy. And it really is centered on like who you are at your core. So that's why it's always important to know your sun. Your moon sign is the part of you that has a lot to do with your emotions and the things that feel comfortable for you, or things that feel safe. And so when we talk about our moon has a lot to do with like our sort of like unconscious responses to like our environment, you know, things that like stress, you know, how we handle stress, or things that sort of like upset us, or things that we love and that give us that sense of like fulfillment and like warmth. The moon has a lot to do with that, you know, our family dynamics and, you know, our ability to nurture people and be nurtured in return. And then when we talk about our rising sign is the part of us that has a lot to do with like our self-image in terms of like how we sort of present ourselves to the public. A lot of times it has to do with like our personal style, how we look physically, and also the way in which we interact with the world around us. So depending on like, and you know, those three pieces, they can fall in different signs. But I've also seen people who have had like all three in the same sign as well, which is really interesting.
Wow, that is so, I couldn't imagine that, only because that's so interesting. I feel like that's the opposite of my personal situation, because my sun sign is a Virgo and my moon sign is Leo.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like they're inherently very different signs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Absolutely.
almost funny because I can see there are like certain ways I'm so Virgo. Like I'm almost like a to the book Virgo. It's hilarious. But then I notice in the things that I crave in life and the way I'll communicate, or the way, just in general, the way I tend to work feels very, very Leo. It's just so interesting. So to be one sign across the board must be so crazy.
It's really interesting. To me, it just like sort of like amplifies the energy that's already in the chart. And you know, when we talk about the birth chart, we talk about astrology, the theme around balance is a big theme that tends to come up a lot, you know, like trying to balance, you know, the different parts of ourselves. And so whenever I see that there's like a cluster of the same sign in a person's chart, usually the theme around balance is something that definitely comes up for them. Absolutely.
Wow, that's so interesting. And when it comes to communicating with others too, like does your sun and moon sign and rising affect how you communicate with other people and interact as well?
To some degree, I would say when we talk about communicating, that would more fall along like your Mercury sign. So, we have planets that basically they're in charge of different things or different themes. So the sun has a lot to do with like, creativity and exuberance and vitality. The moon is emotions and feelings and sensitivity. The rising is like, image and like how we sort of interact with the world. And then we have a Mercury sign, which is all about how we communicate and how we process information, how we're able to analyze and learn things. We have a Venus sign. Venus represents what we love and value, in addition to, like relationships and like how we get along with people. We have a Mars sign. Mars represents how we get angry and how we like, kind of like what motivates us, and kind of like drives us. And it also shows us like what we're passionate about. So based on like, and then it goes on down the line, from there. But yeah, so each of the different parts of the birth chart kind of shows like, to me in a way, like how the different parts of ourselves are kind of coming together to like work as like a whole, basically.
So interesting. So for someone that's very new to astrology, who's just starting out, who would like to start learning a little bit more about themselves and a little bit more how they can be their best self, we talked about a lot just now too, and there like how many different signs one person has. Where would you recommend a beginner just simply start? Like what would be your recommendation if someone's just going to scratch the surface?
Sure. So there are a couple of resources that I recommend. There's an app called TimePassages that's really wonderful that you can plug in your birth information and get your birth chart for free. The app will tell you, give you horoscopes, but and to also kind of give you some 101 in terms of like what the birth chart is and what it means. There's also an app called Sanctuary that does that as well. There's a couple of books, one called Astrology for Yourself, which is actually a workbook. So if you get your chart for free online, there's a couple of places that you can get it. You can actually go through the book and actually learn step by step, like how to kind of actually look at your chart and read it. There's another book called Astrology for Real Life as well, and that's by Teresa Reed. The other one, Astrology for Yourself, that's by Demetra George. So those are two books I definitely recommend. And then there's a website called astro.com that's been around for years. It was one of the sites that I kind of like first learned a lot of astrology before I went on to take a mentor. But it's a great resource for people. Like there's tons of articles on there. You can also get your birth chart there for free as well. So I would say that those are like some places where people can start.
Nice. And you almost forgot to mention your book.
Oh, yes.
I've been reading this, and I was going to wait to talk about it a little bit later, but I feel like this is a good opportunity to at least mention it. We can always come back to it. Mm-hmm. But Astrology for Happiness and Success. This book has been so cool, and what I love about it is that it's very personal. Obviously, like of course you would want an astrology book to be personal, but this is personal, specific to your sign. So there is a section for every single sign in this book, and one of the things I love is that the content for each sign is specifically tailored to what that sign needs to know. It's not just like every single topic for every single sign. It's uniquely towards your needs. Like, for example, on my page, which is like, I folded it because I wanted to like always be able to refer to it quickly. But on my page, the introduction says, this chapter is dedicated to providing you with the tools to conquer your self-doubt, be more flexible, and have healthy relationships with significant others, friends, and family. So I love that because every single sign's chapter has a different goal. Mm-hmm. And it's just been so amazingly helpful and so cool to learn what's written in here. And you had mentioned too, I was reading for my sign, for my sun sign, but you had also mentioned that I should also be reading the sections for my moon and rising signs.
Yeah. So the way that I wrote this book, I wanted it to be sort of like a self-care manual, basically. And so what I did was for each sign, I have sections in there about, how to deal with family, how to get over heartbreak, what to do if, you're feeling burnt out in your career, how to organize your living space, to make it more conducive to the kind of energy that you're trying to bring in. I talk about like, scents, fragrances and like colors that you can wear to like invoke certain energy. I even have like journaling exercises and like mantras in there as well. And so what I wanted to do was kind of give everyone sort of like a comprehensive, like I said, self-care manual that they can use based on their birth chart to kind of do everything from like find some success in career to find success in love to just feeling more empowered, and more confident as well. And so in each of the 12 chapters, they basically, for each of the 12 signs, I definitely recommend people read their sun sign. But yeah, the moon sign actually is a good place to look at too, especially when we talk about like the home related stuff, because your moon sign has a lot to do with like what makes you feel comfortable in like your domestic life, your like your home space, your living space. And then with your rising sign, because that has a lot to do with your appearance, of course, colors that you wear and like, how you look and things like that. If you look good on the outside, you tend to feel sometimes better on the inside and, vice versa. So yeah, I would definitely recommend people read all three of those things to see if there's some nuggets in there for them.
Amazing. I can't wait to go back into it now with that information. This, guys, I definitely, for our listeners and for our viewers, I highly recommend this book. I will link it. We will link it in the description for you so that you can access it. But yeah, definitely pick that up. I love it.
Thank you.
Okay. So Mecca, tell us, how can we use astrology to be our best selves? How can we recognize our strengths, realize our differences, work the best with others?
Sure. So I think I definitely always recommend people to get a reading by a professional astrologer. I think it's really helpful to learn astrology on your own. But if you're just starting out, it's always a good idea to get a professional astrologer to look at things for you, because they can see things that you might not be able to see. But that being said, I think when we talk about astrology in terms of using it as a tool, I think it can help us to figure out what the best career path is for us. I think it can help us with working through, relationship challenges and issues, especially like, in terms of romantic, if people have been having issues, finding the right partner, astrology can show you like, patterns, make you aware of patterns, in terms of like how you relate to people and like what you can do to like change or shift those patterns. With family members, same thing, family dynamics, because I feel like it's the people that's closest to us that tends to push our buttons the most, And so, astrology can show us like how we can better get along with folks, and a lot of times, what I think is really cool, especially with relationships of all types, whether it's professional, personal, romantic, I think what astrology can do is kind of like, it brings everything back to the self, and kind of seeing like how our actions and our thinking and our beliefs and, our conditioning and all of that, how that plays a part in terms of like the relationship dynamics that we tend to have with other people, and how we, when we start to work on those things and unpack them, and work on shifting them, how that can also improve our relationships, and sometimes it can be also a key to kind of showing like relationships that we might need to let go because they're not healthy for us, Another way, when we talk about like the self-care piece, that's a big part of like my astrology practice, and telling people like, how they can sort of take better care of themselves and like what they need, because a lot of times people come to me and they're feeling very burnt out, and just kind of feeling like, even around health issues, sometimes we can talk about that. And I can say like, hey, this might be something that you might want to follow up on, to make sure it's not something, worse, or this is where you might want to be mindful of, things. So there's really a lot of different things that astrology can do in terms of like helping us. And I think it's just a matter of just being open to it, and then also like making sure that we follow through and do the work.
That makes so much sense. And in the beginning of your explanation, you mentioned that an astrologer might actually be able to see things or notice things that you might not even know about yourself right now. And that was one of the questions too that I wanted to ask. Do you find that astrology can really help people become more self-aware?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in terms of when we talk about like change and like self-development, I think one of the biggest ways that we're able to make the changes or to develop ourselves has a lot to do with the awareness, and kind of recognizing, certain patterns or recognizing certain habits. And then once we're aware, we're like, oh, wow, like I definitely have had multiple times, being in session with a client, and I'm like, connecting the dots for them. And they're like, oh my God, like I didn't even think about it, like a lot of aha moments. And so, yeah, so I absolutely think that astrology can kind of help us to see things that we might not necessarily be aware of, so that we can be aware of it and then, do something about it.
Amazing. And can understanding astrological signs help us foster a more positive and inclusive mindset?
I think so. I think one of the things that we do have to be kind of careful of is excluding people because of their signs. Like I know that when we talk about like social media, there's like, a lot of memes and like jokes about like the stereotypical behaviors of like, the signs. So like right now we're in Sagittarius season. And, as a Sagittarius, like it's always funny to see when people are like, oh, Sagittarius are so loud and, reckless. And there's some truth to those things. But I think it's really important that people recognize that each of the 12 signs runs through us in some way. So so if there's a sign that you don't get along with, or that presses your buttons, usually it's because there's that sign present in you that you need to develop or sort of embrace in order to be able to like learn a lesson or to like move to like the next step of your life. So I always invite people to kind of like use astrology again to kind of look at themselves, through a lens and kind of see like, how might I need to work on some things or change some things, or how do I be more accepting too?
That makes so much sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
There are so many resources, especially online, that offer astrology advice and readings, and some of these resources even are conflicting. So you may read one thing on one site and something totally different on another. So what would you tell us to help us weed through what we should really be focusing on or what we should be aware of as we're inundated with this information? How can you advise that what we're looking at is accurate and that we're taking the right thing from it?
No, I think that's a great question. And what I usually try to advise people is to like do your research, to be mindful of believing everything that you see and hear, about astrology on the internet. And, astrology at its best should be encouraging, it should be inspiring, it should be uplifting. Even if we're talking about things that might be difficult or like not so nice, political stuff and, things of that nature. It's just, you should still be able to walk away from it feeling like, okay, this is going on, but I know that, this can happen, or, I have some hope, or I'm optimistic about, the changes that are happening, or things of that nature. If it's too much fear mongering or too negative, or, if you just don't feel right about it, I would just say, trust your intuition, because your intuition is always the strongest thing. But yeah, I would encourage you, like, especially if you're thinking about getting a reading and you're a first timer, research, find out who's reputable. And you can definitely kind of Google around and kind of see, what's what based on what people are posting and like what their voice sounds like, in terms of like horoscopes and things of that nature. So yeah, please do your research. And, if you do come across things that kind of make you a little bit weird, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do personal readings for people as well, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah. So if people are interested in booking a reading with me, yeah, they can find me on my website and book there.
Awesome. So I'll link the website. That's the best way to reach out to you for that. So guys, if you're interested, talking to the audience, if you're interested in having Mecca do a reading for you, definitely check out her website, reach out directly to her. And you don't have to be an ongoing coaching client for something like that, right?
No. Like I have my regular folks that, that I see a little bit more frequently, but usually folks come through maybe like once or twice a year, and that's good with them. And then I kind of also encourage people to kind of space out time, between readings, because you need to be able to process it and kind of sit with it and do any work, that might be necessary.
Right. Such a good point. Thank
Yeah.
you for that. Okay, I'm so excited for this next portion of our episode where Mecca is going to be giving us a 2021 forecast. I am dying to hear what she has to say. So Mecca, right before you get into the forecast, can you please let our audience know what really is the purpose of a 2021 forecast, and how can the forecast help us with our lives so we know exactly what to be listening for as you review it with us?
Sure. So a forecast really is kind of like almost like a weather forecast, before, you go outside, you kind of take a peek at the weather forecast just to know that you're going to be prepared for, if it snows, if it rains, right? So it's pretty much a similar sort of concept when we talk about like astrology forecasts or like horoscopes. We're kind of looking at the astrology weather and kind of saying like, okay, we might expect this turbulence or this, this to happen. So here's how you can best be prepared, and so again, it's not, I would always tell people that like when we talk about forecasts, it's not about setting anything in stone, or, trying to predict like gloom and doom and like those kinds of things, right? Because I still believe that, we have free will and we have the ability to choose, sort of like how we want things to go, even, when it comes to things that are outside of our control, right? We can still kind of figure out like how we want to navigate that or respond to it. But yeah, ultimately a forecast is just kind of like a tool that we use for kind of saying like what's coming up and just making sure that we have the right gear with us, to be able to go forward.
Yes. Okay. Amazing. Should we get into it?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about 2021 as an overview, I think one of the big things that is really going to be coming through for the year has a lot to do with like being future forward. And I think there's going to be a lot of folks who are going to be resistant to change, but those of us who are ready for change and ready for something new, I think 2020 was the year where everything sort of like fell apart. A lot of things just came undone, and so 2021 is going to be the year where we start to sort of pick up the pieces and start to rebuild. But in order for us to rebuild, it's really going to be a thing where like, all industries, all parts of the world, like it's really going to be an all hands on deck situation. It's really going to be about community, about thinking about others outside of just ourselves, about, trying to bring forth the best that humanity has to offer. And so when we think about that, at the collective level, definitely we're going to see a lot of shifts and changes, in terms of like politics and, that kind of thing, and, business and stuff like that, the economy. But I think at a more personal level, I think what I would tell folks is, again, try not to concern yourself with the future, right? And I know that sounds kind of like weird because I was just, it's future focused. But what I mean by that is we create the future in the here and now. So a lot of what we have to do for next year is kind of focusing on the moment and being in the moment and trying to make the most and do what we can in the moment, because that's going to inform the future. That's going to be the thing that's going to get us through. So, there's still a lot of work that we need to do both individually and collectively. But my hope is that now that everyone has seen just how much is at stake, when it comes to, healthcare and, equality and, clean air and water and, all those things, that now that everybody is going to pitch in and do what they can in their own individual ways so we can all work as a team and work together.
Very, very interesting. I feel like something so interesting about the upcoming time is that it sounds crazy, but I almost feel like we're going into the upcoming year stronger than we ever were, sort of. I mean, what we've lived through, we all learned a lot. We learned a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot about others. We learned a lot about our world. We learned a lot about relationships. We're different people. I know for myself, I am a different person, completely, than I was before this all happened this year. And I think that we've all grown. I think we really have all grown a lot. Whether we feel emotionally noticeably different, I'm not sure, but I think that this experience was such an eye-opener on so many levels. And I think that we have a better idea now of what we really value and what we feel we have to offer, whereas before we were I personally also feel like we were very much all kind of stuck in a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And we were running, we were running and we were always like, oh yeah, that requires a little bit of thought. I'm going to sit down with that. I'm going to refine that. And then but that never happens until you stop, and when we were forced to stop, and it wasn't until we were forced to stop, that's when I did that work for myself.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think you mentioned, Christina, values. That is definitely going to be something, I would say is going to be a big theme. Like, what are our values? What are our beliefs and our philosophies, about ourselves and in each other, and how how do we, it's not going to be just enough to talk the talk, we're going to have to walk it too, and I think that what we've seen, especially, here in the United States, there's been a lot of lip service about certain values and upholding certain values, but then seeing that people, are not really living that. And so I think one of the big things in terms of the changes that we're going to see really is going to have a lot to do with what do we value, and are we actually living by those values as well? Yeah.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to the future. I am. I'm looking forward to seeing how things are going to be different once we are back out there and, in our new state of mind.
Yeah, me too. And I would say in terms of tips that I can offer folks, I think, just being open, being flexible, not feeling like you have to have all the right answers right away, not feeling like you have to have the only answer. I think what 2021 is really going to show us is that, two things could be true at the same time, and being able to hold space for multiple ideas and multiple schools of thought and multiple perspectives. As opposed to trying to, being fixated on one thing or too narrow-minded. So that it goes also in terms of inclusivity, and diversity and those things. I really think 2021 is really going to take us to task and help us so everything that we've learned this year, like you mentioned, this next year is going to ask us that we apply, these lessons.
Absolutely. And as someone who intends to apply those lessons myself, I'm excited to see, honestly, where we go with this, what things do look like in a couple of years from now. I do think that we'll be in a better place that we were in right before the pandemic. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share for us that is maybe a little bit more personal, or things that we should particularly be looking out for?
Yeah. So when we talk about 2021, I think when we talk about, let's talk about the fire signs. So fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. fire signs are so good at being so independent, right? We love kind of doing things on our own, but I think where we're going to be doing work and also where we can find opportunity over this next year is through relationships, in terms of like friendships, community. It could be, some of it could be partnerships, and that could be romantic, but just in general, I think fire signs, like where we're going to be looking to build things and also like learning lessons is going to a lot to do with like recognizing that we can't do it all by ourselves. For air signs, which is Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, my air signs, you guys, you're going to be in the spotlight over this next year for 2021. So, creative projects, any sort of thing in terms of like building your confidence and kind of like going in your own direction, your independence, being your own person. Like, this is going to be a year where you're going to find yourself craving just to be more authentic and living your truth and being more true to who you are. Because I think with air signs, because you're so good at being friends to folks, sometimes air signs could get a little bit tripped up with like people pleasing, and trying to be everything to everyone. And so what air signs are going to be finding over this next year is really kind of like, nope, I got to be me, right? And so that is going to help to attract the right people to you because you're being genuine and authentic and true to who you are. With earth signs, my Capricorns, my Virgos, and my Tauruses. These are my folks that love to work, right? Love money, love building things, right? Whether it's building a family, building a business, building a career. So the thing with earth signs is that because you guys are so practical, because you're so, prepared, and you really enjoy like putting in those hours to build something that you can enjoy, build things that are going to last. Sometimes you might find yourselves, kind of going through the motions or sticking with things that have outgrown their usefulness. And that can kind of put you in a place where you can feel very stagnant, and kind of feeling like undervalued or underappreciated, for the things that you actually can do, or at times feeling unfulfilled. So I think with earth signs, this year is going to show you like where you can have both the money and that security that you love, and also that fulfillment. So usually with earth signs, you guys tend to choose your heads over your hearts. This year is going to show you that you can actually align your head with your heart, and that is going to translate into your career and into your finances when you really show up for the things that you value. And then last but not least, my water signs, and that's Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. You guys are going to be working on relationships. So some of that may mean, starting a new relationship, building a family, building a home with someone. Some of it could also be around setting healthier boundaries, because with water, you guys are so compassionate and, so like you're always making yourselves available, for the people that you love. And sometimes it can really take a wear and tear, on your energy and on your ability to kind of do your own thing. And so I think what this new year is going to do for you is help to show you like where you might need to kind of balance a little bit more of like the me versus the we, and where it's okay to kind of do your own thing and kind of fly solo without necessarily needing a whole bunch of people around you, and kind of like being a little bit more selective about like who you welcome into your life and who you don't.
That was amazing. So interesting. Definitely lots of like change coming up. And I almost feel like if like you had said, if you know what might be happening with the stars, you can recognize opportunities and make the most of them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I will provide Mecca's contact information in the description of this video and all of her resources as well. Feel free to reach out to Mecca if you have any other questions. I'll link her social media pages as well, and any ways that you can get in touch with her directly.
Yay, I look forward to hearing from you guys.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.